Well, good morning, Lorraine. It's good to meet with you and good to talk with you about the fascinating project that your group has been doing in Nicaragua. And so I understand that Change for Children has been there for a number of years, and you have actually been working in and out of Nicaragua for a number of years also. Um, so the project, as I understand it, was all about empowering the local indigenous people in a very remote part of Nicaragua that is both a biosphere and a UNESCO protected area. For all the good that does, people are encroaching on it, despite that status, and there is conflict. And what we're looking at with this little side event is Innovations for Peace. And so I was quite intrigued by what you folks are doing there. Looking at some of the things that came out of your report, can you talk a little bit about what you mean by prioritizing Indigenous knowledge and the three pillars that you guys try to reinforce?
Sure. So this area, as you mentioned, is a extremely remote area in Nicaragua. It's like all the way at the end of the last road, heading north, and then 3 days in dugout canoe river down the Rio Coco, the Coco River that separates Nicaragua and Honduras. So it is a extremely remote area, and so the area has been marginalized. The government doesn't have enough money to reach it. The Department of Education doesn't have enough staff to teach all the students. There's not proper health services either, just because of its remote status, and also because it's indigenous people that inhabit these areas. So part of the problem with the extreme poverty that exists there is that the indigenous people are dependent on outside sources. There's no local employment, for example. There's if they eat through subsistence agriculture, right? So if there's a climate interruptions or change in climate, obviously has changed like the growing season, so sometimes their crops fail, and then they become dependent on outside food aid, and so they've lost their sovereignty because they're very dependent on the outside world to help them through these climate disasters. And so our project was focusing on helping them to retain or to regain their sovereignty. And so we focused on sustainability, like what are the sustainable initiatives that we can help like small agricultural producers and natural medicine practitioners, and to be able to serve the needs of their population, both from food and health perspectives. And then self-sufficiency, right? How can they be self-sufficient and like attend to the needs of their own communities? And then improved governance, right? So how were they able to govern themselves and not always rely on the outside world or the Nicaraguan national government, for example, to tell them what to do? And so all of the initiatives in this very ambitious, like multifaceted FIT project were focused on these three key pillars of sovereignty, sustainability, self-sufficiency, and improved governance.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that idea, and I think somehow citizen science must tie into this. And maybe you touched on it when you were talking about plants and things like that. But that was a new term to me, citizen science. What does it mean to you folks, and what does it mean to the people there?
So we, the indigenous people have a lot of experience, obviously, in their own territory, in their own forest, being able to figure out, which plant, which leaf should be combined with which root, and those two things together can make a medicine. I mean, it's amazing, really. Like, I think we'd probably do in Western medicine, like, decades of testing to be able to figure this out. And somehow the indigenous people just know it you know, through the knowledge that's been passed down generation to generation. So we definitely took an approach of, well, I mean, and of course our project was implemented by the Indigenous people. So they were already very proud of their natural medicine practitioners. They actually said that you know, they were able to cure COVID, or not cure it, but lessen the effects of COVID in that region. And they had very few COVID deaths and very few complications from COVID. And of course, as I mentioned before, they were marginalized. So the health system in Nicaragua did not, you know, show up with vaccines, and they didn't show up with doctors and medical care. And so they were forced to rely on their own traditional medicine practitioners who had, you know, very elaborate recipes of, like, you know, teas and tinctures that that helped people survive COVID, which was amazing to see. And so, you know, coming out of COVID, they were very much very proud of this practice, and also the Nicaraguan government, you know, giving them credit to that natural medicine is very much promoted by the Ministry of Health. And our project actually installed a number of natural medicine gardens, because they find these plants in the forest, and we were trying to, you know, cultivate them locally. And the Ministry of Health said, put one of those gardens like on our grounds, like we want it right behind the health center. And so we were able to do that because they use natural medicine extensively, or promote the use of natural medicine also through the health system in Nicaragua, which is very much different from Honduras, for example, where natural medicine practice is outlawed in many places. So yeah, so citizen science is just a recognition of the importance of local knowledge and to treat local populations. And in many cases, of course, it's the only kind of science that the Indigenous people trust, right? Like, because there's been so many interventions that come in from outside that don't work. And so we very much prioritize like local knowledge and the local data collection, and, you know, the collection of stories from elders and recipes from elders. And of course, we digitized all of that, and, you know, made videos and recipes and everything, and put it onto our digital libraries, which was which are used in the schools, which is a result of our first BIT project, which was a technology education project.
Great. So it just kind of leads into the last question, and we're running out of our time, but it sounds like by the Ministry of Health inviting you to put the garden in the back of the health center, was that out in the forest, or was that at the health center in Managua, or both?
No, out in, yeah, there is a little health center. Well, in many of the Indigenous communities, which are, you know, like there's 1,200, 1,500 people living in these little villages. And so they do have health centers, which are not always well staffed and don't have enough equipment. But they do have doctors and nurses sometimes, and occasionally they have beds. So yeah, and the medicine, which they sometimes have and sometimes don't. And so that's why they actually are very much like for treating of malaria and COVID and many of the common diseases that are there. The health centers are, you know, relying on natural medicine because there is no other medicine available.
Yeah. So lastly, we are wanting to talk a little bit about peace. And this is a high conflict area for a number of reasons. There's well, one basic reason: there's resources that other people want that are in indigenous territory. What would be, kind of philosophically or whatever, what would be some of the key things that you think this project contributes to helping protect the indigenous people, and in a meta sense, promote peace, because there's some clear definitions, there's some rules and laws, etc. But how do you see this project as enabling peace?
So the Boswas biosphere is the largest tropical rainforest north of the Amazon in the Americas. So it's a very important forest that needs to be preserved, not only for the health of the indigenous people that live there, but also for the health of the planet, right? So we all should be concerned about the preservation of this forest in terms of what is happening, globally in terms of climate change. And of course, these people are also heavily impacted by climate change. There's they're very, very vulnerable. There's increased natural disasters going through there, and the growing seasons have changed, and the people are practicing subsistence agriculture and trying to make sure that they're harvesting enough crops to feed themselves. But this is all being complicated, of course, by climate change. And so it's a bigger problem than just like the territorial government trying to protect their land or the Nicaraguan government trying to protect their forest reserve. It's actually a global issue. And so we, in our innovation, tested using mapping software called Mapeo, which also connected the tribal groups across the world who are all using Mapeo and sharing threats to the land collectively, and different strategies that they're all using to try to protect their land and try to negotiate with the people who are encroaching upon that land. But it's also a way to show the local authorities, right? Like, this is our traditional territory, and these are all the places where people are encroaching upon our land and burning down the forest and growing crops. And I mean, these people are armed, and so the indigenous people can't go back there by themselves and say like, hey, this is our land, get off our land, because it's a very dangerous situation, right? So we need the intervention of the Nicaraguan government. We need the intervention of the United Nations in order to save this forest. We need some input from outside. And of course, the mapping software and the digitizing of all the information of where the encroachment is happening and why is, of course, the first step to making that case for international attention.
And all of that leads to, like, a big part of peace is well-being, and a big part of well-being is the survival of the planet, as you inferred at the very beginning.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I want to thank you for taking time to talking to us, and this is an amazing project, and I hope that, of course, your name and contact will be in the brochure that's handed out.
Okay.
And so I hope that some of the participants here in Winnipeg might be contacting you and asking more questions and ideas, and hopefully more good things will come out of this. So thank you very much
Excellent.
for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I think that went well. I'll review the tape and try to get it down to about 10 minutes. We were a little more than 10 minutes there, but that's okay.
Sure.
We'll try and edit out a little bit. But
okay, great.
And what I'll do is after the meeting on the 27th, I will mail out to you guys the entire thing that we just recorded, because you as an organization may be able to take other pieces of it and use it for other purposes.
Sure. Sure, that sounds great. Okay, well, thanks. It was great chatting with you.
You take care.
You too. Bye-bye.